TOEFL! Before we start, don't forget to like and subscribe. Good luck!
Please read through the directions or skip ahead. Passage number 1. Listen to a conversation between a student and a housing coordinator.
Hi, I'm here because I am having a bit of an issue with my dorm assignment for this semester.
Sure, I can help with that. What seems to be the problem?
Well, I was assigned a double room, but my roommate and I have really different schedules and it's been hard to adjust. He stays up really late, and I have early classes, so I'm not getting enough sleep.
I see. That's definitely a common concern. Have you spoken to your roommate about it?
Yes, I have. And he's tried to keep things quiet, but it's still tough, because even small noises keep me awake. I was wondering if it's possible to switch to a single room.
I understand. Well, we do have some options. Let me check the availability of single rooms. But just to set expectations, they're limited and in high demand, especially at this time of year.
I figured as much. If that's not possible, is there any other way to make the current situation work?
Yes, there are a couple of options. We could consider switching you to another double room with a different roommate whose schedule might be more compatible. Another option is using earplugs or a white noise machine. Some students find those helpful.
Switching roommates could work, but I don't really want to go through the hassle unless it's a good match.
That's fair. How about I put in a request for a single room, and if one opens up, you'd be one of the first people we notify.
That sounds good. How long would I have to wait for that?
It depends. It could be a few weeks or longer. For now, I recommend trying the earplugs, and we'll reach out as soon as there's an update.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate your help with this.
What issue is the student having? Why does the student feel that a single room might be a good solution? What suggestions are given to the student? What does the student say about switching to another double room? What does the housing coordinator imply when they say this?
For now, I recommend trying the earplugs.
Passage number 2. Listen to part of a talk in a psychology class.
So as I was saying, memory isn't a single simple process. Instead, it's made up of various stages and types which interact in complex ways. One widely accepted model is the three-stage model, which divides memory into sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. Now, sensory memory is the initial stage where we hold impressions of sensory information for a brief period. It allows us to process what we see and hear just long enough to pay attention to it, before it either fades or moves into short-term memory.
Excuse me, Professor. How long does sensory memory typically last?
Good question. Sensory memory is very brief. Visual information in sensory memory, for example, lasts about half a second, while auditory information might last slightly longer, around 3 to 4 seconds. This short span allows us to momentarily retain a vast amount of sensory input without it overwhelming us. Then, only what we actively pay attention to moves on to short-term memory. Now, short-term memory, which some researchers refer to as working memory, is where we store information temporarily, usually for around 20 to 30 seconds. If you repeat information to yourself, you can keep it in short-term memory a bit longer. Otherwise, it's either forgotten or transferred to long-term memory if it's important enough. Our working memory has a limited capacity, usually about 7 items. That's why you might notice that phone numbers are often 7 digits long. Long-term memory, on the other hand, is a more permanent storage system. This is where information that we've rehearsed or found meaningful is stored, often for long periods or even a lifetime. Long-term memory itself is divided into various types, such as procedural memory, which is for skills, and declarative memory, which is for facts and events.
Does everyone remember information in the same way? Or do individual differences play a big role?
Excellent point. Yes, individual differences do play a significant role. Factors like attention, prior knowledge, and even emotional state can all influence memory retention. For example, information connected to an emotional event tends to be recalled more easily. This is because emotions can trigger the release of stress hormones that affect the strength of our memory. Now, moving on to forgetting. This is where things get interesting. One major theory about forgetting is called decay theory, which proposes that memories fade over time if they're not used or recalled. Essentially, the longer we go without thinking about something, the more likely it is to be forgotten. This theory helps explain why people often struggle to remember details they haven't revisited in years. Another significant theory is interference theory. This suggests that forgetting occurs because certain memories interfere with others. For example, when you're trying to remember where you parked your car today, yesterday's memory of parking might interfere. There's also proactive interference, where old memories interfere with new ones, and retroactive interference, where new information disrupts old memories. To sum up, memory is not a simple, linear process. It involves complex systems, and factors like decay and interference can affect what we ultimately remember or forget. All right, let's stop here, and I'll take any final questions if you have them.
What is the lecture mainly about? According to the professor, what is the capacity of short-term memory? What is the professor's attitude toward the process of forgetting? What happens when new information disrupts old memories? What are some examples of factors that can affect memory retention? What does the professor imply when he says this?
This is where things get interesting.
Passage number 3. Listen to a conversation between a student and a teacher's assistant.
Hey, Rachel, how can I help you?
Hi, thanks for meeting with me. I have some questions about the research paper for our sociology class. I'm feeling a bit unsure about a few things.
Sure thing. Could you tell me what parts you're having trouble with?
Well, mostly the structure. I'm not sure if I'm organizing it correctly. The professor said it should be 8 to 10 pages, and it's supposed to cover a specific social issue. I chose income inequality, but I'm not sure how to arrange my points effectively.
Got it. Structuring can definitely be tricky. Generally, I'd recommend starting with a clear introduction that outlines your main argument. Then, in the body, you could organize it by subtopics related to income inequality, like its causes, impacts on different groups, and potential solutions. Each section should support your thesis or main argument.
That helps. I was also wondering about sources. The professor mentioned we need to use credible sources, but what exactly does that mean?
Good question. Credible sources are those that come from reliable and unbiased authors or organizations, like academic journals, books published by reputable publishers, or official reports. Avoid using websites that aren't reviewed, like blogs or random articles. It's best to look for peer-reviewed journal articles or studies.
Okay, that makes sense. I found a few articles, but I wasn't sure if they were acceptable. Also, is there a specific citation format we need to follow?
Yes, you'll need to use APA format. Make sure you cite both in text and in a references section at the end of your paper. APA style has specific rules for citing different types of sources, so double-check that you're formatting everything correctly. There are also citation guides online, like Purdue OWL, that can be really helpful.
APA format. Got it. That's helpful to know. One last question about my thesis statement. I've written something, but I'm not sure if it's strong enough. My current thesis is, income inequality is a major issue affecting many people.
It's a start, but try to make it a bit more specific so it reflects what your paper will argue. For example, you could say, income inequality, driven by various social and economic factors, perpetuates poverty and limits social mobility. That way, you're giving a preview of what your paper will discuss.
Oh, I see. That sounds much stronger. I'll try rephrasing it like that. Thank you for all this guidance.
You're welcome. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have more questions as you work on it. Good luck with your paper.
What is the conversation mainly about? Why does the student feel that the assignment might be challenging? What suggestions are given to the student? According to the TA, what makes a source credible? What does the TA imply when they say this?
It's best to look for peer-reviewed journal articles or studies.
Passage number 4. Listen to a lecture in an economics class.
So that brings us to the concept of equilibrium in supply and demand. In simple terms, equilibrium is the point at which the quantity of goods supplied equals the quantity of goods demanded. When this balance occurs, the price of the good tends to remain stable because neither a surplus nor a shortage is driving it up or down. Think of equilibrium as the sweet spot where the market clears, meaning everything produced at that price point is sold. Now, if there's an increase in demand, for example, maybe for a popular new product, that increase causes a rightward shift in the demand curve. This typically leads to a higher equilibrium price because now more people want the product, and they're willing to pay more to get it. The higher price also encourages producers to increase the quantity supplied to meet that demand, pushing towards a new equilibrium.
Professor, if demand goes up and prices rise, does that mean consumers will always pay the higher price?
Good question. Not necessarily. If prices rise too high, some consumers may drop out of the market, especially if it's a non-essential item or if there are substitutes available. This is where elasticity comes into play. Demand elasticity refers to how sensitive consumers are to price changes. If demand is elastic, consumers might quickly change their buying behavior in response to even a slight increase in price. However, for inelastic products, like certain medications, demand may stay relatively stable regardless of price changes because there aren't good substitutes and the need is pressing. On the supply side, we have the law of supply, which states that as the price of a good or service increases, suppliers are more likely to increase production to maximize profit. So when both supply and demand interact, they respond dynamically to each other. If there's a technological improvement, for example, producers might be able to supply more at a lower cost, which would shift the supply. Finally, shifts in supply or demand can come from several factors, including changes in consumer preferences, technological advancements, or even global events that impact production costs. For instance, a sudden increase in oil prices could lead to higher transportation costs, affecting many goods and causing an overall shift in the supply curve. All right, let's take a pause here. These dynamics are core to understanding how prices are set in the real world and why they fluctuate. Remember, supply and demand aren't static. They're influenced by various external and internal factors that make the marketplace a constantly shifting environment.
What is the lecture mainly about? According to the professor, what happens when there is an increase in demand? What is the professor's attitude toward understanding supply and demand dynamics? What is meant by
Elasticity of demand.
What are some examples of factors that affect supply and demand? What does the professor imply when he says this?
Supply and demand aren't static.
Passage number 5. Listen to a lecture in a history class.
So at this point in our discussion of Isaac Newton, we come to his most revolutionary work, The Laws of Motion and Universal Gravitation. Newton's laws fundamentally changed how we understand the physical world. His first law, which you may remember as the law of inertia, states that an object will remain at rest or in uniform motion unless acted upon by an external force. This was groundbreaking at the time, because it contradicted Aristotle's long-held belief that objects naturally move toward rest. Newton showed that objects in motion or at rest are simply behaving according to their natural state, until something else interferes. Now, his second law is the famous force equals mass times acceleration formula, or FMA. What's incredible about this law is that it gave scientists a way to calculate the exact force needed to change the motion of an object. This was crucial in building our understanding of everything from the movement of planets to the functioning of machines. Imagine.
So, was that the same law that helped explain gravity?
Not exactly. That's where his law of universal gravitation comes in, which was yet another significant contribution. Newton theorized that every object in the universe attracts every other object with a force that's proportional to their masses and inversely proportional to the square of the distance between them. In other words, the greater the mass and the closer the objects, the stronger the gravitational pull between them. This meant he could explain why the planets orbit the sun in predictable patterns, connecting motion on Earth to the cosmos. Newton's insights also paved the way for other scientific discoveries. His work laid the foundation for classical mechanics, which remained the standard model until Einstein's theory of relativity in the early 20th century. Newton's contributions were so profound that he became one of the most influential figures in the scientific revolution. His ability to connect different areas of knowledge, mathematics, physics, and astronomy, was revolutionary for his time and remains relevant today. Let's keep in mind, though, that while Newton's theories were groundbreaking, science builds upon itself. Later discoveries, such as quantum mechanics, have further developed and refined our understanding of the physical world. Still, without Newton, these advances might not have been possible. His laws are not only significant historically, but are still foundational concepts in physics today.
What aspect of Isaac Newton does the professor focus on in the lecture? Why does the professor mention Aristotle's belief that objects naturally move toward rest? What is the professor's purpose in mentioning Newton's law of universal gravitation? What does the professor suggest is the most likely result of Newton's ability to connect different areas of knowledge? How does the professor feel about Newton's contributions? What does the professor mean when he says this?
Newton's contributions were so profound that he became one of the most influential figures in the scientific revolution.
This is your answer key for passages 1 through 5. Remember to focus on the main ideas and tone of the lecture. Understanding the speaker's perspective will help you choose the right answers. Take notes on key details and listen for any changes in topic. These cues will guide you through each question and improve your overall score.
And don't forget to level up!